Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout, where today we're going to be going over the history of the double barrel shotgun and kind of how that one's changed throughout the Fallout universe, as well as how it's not really changed all that much. So originally I was deciding whether or not to do this with just the double barrel shotgun, or if I was going to include all the shotguns, but I think I'll save a separate video for just the combat shotguns, because we've gotten quite a few of them throughout the history of Fallout, and they have changed quite a bit, as well as we've gotten some really interesting models to kind of go over. Either way, let's talk about the double barrel in this video. So the double barrel shotgun first appeared in the very first Fallout game, as you would kind of expect. A double barrel shotgun fits in the Wasteland quite well, as we'd also already had movies like Mad Max, which already solidified something like a sawed-off double barrel in this universe, or in a universe similar to it. So it makes sense that it would appear in the Fallout universe. And the double barrel shotgun was the first shotgun that you could get in the very first Fallout game. You could actually get this right away if you went right back to the vault that you started out in, and you picked one of the locks. This would get you a shotgun and some shells. This one did pretty good damage early on, and it was pretty solid, honestly, because you didn't have a whole lot of other options. It was really like this and the 10mm submachine gun that were going to be the best options for when enemies get really close to you. This one did pretty decent damage, doing 12 to 22 damage per shot, which was actually pretty good in that game. You could only shoot one barrel at a time, though. You couldn't actually pull both triggers and fire them both, which is a little bit interesting, assuming this gun had two triggers. The model is well, one of the older models, so you can't see it too clearly. This one used the 12 gauge, and it was only in competition with one other shotgun, being the combat shotgun. Now, that one would be better than this, because that one could fire one shot at a time or in bursts and held 12 rounds in it. So it was just better, as well as it did higher damage than the double barrel. So as soon as you got that, then this gun would no longer be of use. But the good news was that you didn't really get that until about the halfway point in the game. So the double barrel could still provide a very good amount of damage up close and personal. And again, the only other gun it was really competing with, at least in the early game, was like the 10mm submachine gun, which was still good and kind of better than the 10mm pistol, so you could use both of these if you would like. In Fallout 2, the double barrel shotgun would make an appearance once again, although we'd actually get two different models for it in this game, where we'd have the standard double barrel shotgun, which already looked like a cut down double barrel, and we had the sawed off shotgun, which looked pretty much the same. It looked very similar. The models don't really change all that much. Once again, these had very similar stats that they did in the first Fallout game. The first shotgun was actually the exact same as it was in the first game, and the sawed off version of it was only slightly better, which is a little bit weird, where it had 2 more maximum damage, so it was 12 to 24. Very, very similar to one another. You could get the regular double barrel shotgun a little bit quicker than the sawed-off double barrel, but it was kind of cool that they implemented in this game. Again, didn't really change all that much. Was an okay shotgun that got outcompeted by like the combat shotguns later on, where Fallout 2 actually had 3 separate combat shotguns, so all of them were kind of better than either of these. But it was kind of cool that we got at least a different model, and you could use it a little bit differently in Fallout 2. In Fallout Tactics, the double barrel would make its return once again, although this time it wasn't a sawed-off double barrel shotgun, it was a full-sized one. This one was called the Beretta 470 Silverhawk, and you could actually get this one right away if you would like, which did make it kind of useful. This one, once again, did about the same amount of damage as it did in the other Fallout games, of 12 to 22. However, in this game, there was actually an option to burst fire this, or, pull both triggers, basically, which did less damage per shot at 10 to 19, but it made it so you could do more burst damage since you were hitting with 2 of these, which was actually pretty good. And this was probably the scariest weapon, at least in the first mission, because in the first mission there are a couple of guys that do have double barrel shotguns, and if you run right around the corner when they decide to use it, they might actually kill you and you'll have to play the first mission over again. So that does kind of suck. It's not really that great of a shotgun though in Tactics, simply because you already start out with the pump action shotgun, which is just higher damage than the standard double barrel is, at least per shot, as well as the pump action shotgun holds 5 shells, whereas this one only holds 2, so you're going to have to reload it more often. Now, depending on what your character's build setup is, that might not be a big deal, because you might just be able to fire both of these barrels and then reload, and you would basically just be able to shoot one shot from the pump action and reload it anyway. So in that case, you could do more damage with the double barrel potentially. Shotguns were also a bit better in something like Tactics, because they just had a spread that could hit multiple enemies, so that was pretty nice. Still not a fantastic shotgun. Again, you already start out with the pump action shotgun, and even in the first mission in Tactics, you could get a second one. So it wasn't really the best, but it was something interesting. The sawed-off shotgun would change into Fallout 3 and kind of into the next couple of games that we have, where the model would change. This isn't really looking quite like the same sawed-off shotgun that we had seen before. especially since it now has like a hinge and a handle that has been attached to it. That is something that you could do with a sawed-off shotgun if you really wanted to. You don't really see it in the other games, though, where the stock is just cut short and then made into more of a pistol grip. But it does make it so that this one looks a little bit different. And the sawed-off shotgun in Fallout 3 would sadly kind of be at like its lowest point here. Not necessarily because the sawed-off shotgun is all that bad in Fallout 3, it's just that the other shotguns are substantially better than it. The main reason being is that this one cannot hit crits. And crits with shotguns in Fallout 3 were insane because you could hit a crit on every single pellet, and if you rolled a crit, you were going to hit a crit on every pellet that hit. And the sawed-off shotgun just couldn't do that. This was still a decent shotgun in the early game, though, because you may not be able to find something like a combat shotgun. Although as soon as you did, then the sawed-off double barrel was basically useless unless you just wanted to be carrying this around as a pistol, and just use your shotgun shells for that, and you're not using anything else that uses shotgun shells. So, kind of a niche weapon, probably at its weakest in Fallout 3, though. There was one unique version of this as well that you could get, which was called the Kneecapper. This one was actually held by a guy named Ronald. A little bit weird, but either way, in order to get this one, you could either kill him and take this, or if you had Black Widow, you could lure him to the Dunwich building and he would die there and you could take it off of him there, or you could reverse pickpocket him and take the gun that way. Either way, you get a shotgun that is a little bit better than the standard sawed-off shotgun. It does more damage, but it still can't hit crits, which makes it not quite as good. In terms of model, it looks exactly the same as the sawed-off double barrel, so it's really not that different. You would get a full-size double barrel, though, in Point Lookout, and that would be substantially better than the sawed-off version, because this one could hit crits. Although this one had a weird quirk about it, where now every time that you pulled the trigger, you had to fire out both barrels, so you had to reload after every single blast. Now this would do devastating damage at very close range and even out to longer ranges. If you had a sneak crit with the full-size double barrel, you would basically one-shot just about anything in the game. It was really crazy. Even if you were playing on the very hard difficulty, it still killed things very, very efficiently. So sneaking around with a full-size double barrel wasn't really a bad idea. It didn't really have fast follow-up shots, so something like the combat shotgun could still outcompete it later on. But the full-size double barrel did become very, very useful there, and thanks to it being in Point Lookout, you could actually run there pretty early on, assuming you had enough money to take the ferry ride over there. It was pretty easy to find. There was quite a few locations around Point Lookout where you could pick these up, and a lot of the locals had them too, which also made it so this was probably the scariest weapon to run into in that DLC. Into New Vegas, the double barrel would kind of stay the same and kind of be a bit different, because we got two double barrels in New Vegas, where we had the regular sawed-off shotgun. This one was in 12 gauge, which is kind of cool because one of them was in 12, one of them was 20 gauge. The sawed-off double barrel would change a little bit again from Fallout 3, where this one uses the same model as it did in Fallout 3, but this one fires out both barrels every time that you pull the trigger, which is a little bit interesting. It makes it so it is pretty devastating at very close range, but outside of that, not so much, unless you put like slugs into this. New Vegas also introduced quite a few different ammo types that you could put in this, like flechettes or slugs, or Dragon's Breath, which is really fun. I like Dragon's Breath sawed-off double barrel. That one's really cool. This one still did quite good damage. Anything in 12 gauge actually did quite good damage. This was probably the weakest of the 12 gauge shotguns, because like the hunting shotgun is very solid, and the riot shotgun is pretty much just overpowered, but the sawed-off double barrel still had a place to where it could be pretty useful. It was also the only shotgun that you could sneak into casinos too, and at casino shooting range, the sawed-off double barrel is pretty devastating because most of the time all of that fighting is happening at very, very close range if it's happening at all. There was also a unique version of the sawed-off double barrel in this called the Big Boomer, which this one you could either reverse pickpocket Old Lady Gibson to get, or you could kill her and take it. Either of those worked. This one was statistically a little bit stronger than the regular sawed-off shotgun. However, this one didn't count as an improved holdout weapon, so you couldn't sneak it into places like casinos, making it a little bit less useful, but if you wanted a more powerful pistol, you could use this basically as your pistol or as your backup gun. As well as shotguns had access to some pretty good perks in New Vegas, with things like Shotgun Surgeon ignoring a lot of armor, and End State Bag just bullying anything that you wanted to. Even the sawed-off double barrel still benefited pretty heavily from these. Our other double barrel shotgun that we had in New Vegas was the break action under and over 20 gauge shotgun called the Caravan shotgun. Now this was another early game weapon. This one did pretty good damage per shot and pretty good damage per second. It had not really the greatest spread, but it was fairly lightweight. And you could argue it as better than something like the single shot shotgun, even though that one did more damage per shot. This one still had faster follow-up shots, and you did get 2 shots before you needed to reload it, as opposed to just 1 shot from the single-shot shotgun. So it was actually pretty good in the early game, and there was the unique version that you could get, which was the sturdy caravan shotgun, which was a little bit stronger than the regular caravan shotgun. However, this one is kind of weird because it's bugged in the game in a couple different ways. It's bugged to where it has much wider spread than the regular caravan shotgun. The standard caravan shotgun has a spread of 2.2, which isn't really that big. That's not too much spread for a shotgun. However, the sturdy caravan shotgun has a spread of 4, which makes it tied with the sawed-off shotgun for some reason in terms of accuracy, which is not really that great. Again, if you wanted to load slugs into this, it could help it quite a bit. That makes it quite a lot more accurate. And if you didn't really care about the spread too much, if you're shooting at a very close range, then that's perfectly fine as well. It was also not affected by Shotgun Surgeon and by End-State Back because this wasn't coded as a shotgun for some reason, although the regular caravan shotgun is. So it's got a few awkward things about it, but it still is fairly solid in the early game since you get it right away, and you won't have access to those perks until you're at least level 6 and level 10, so that's kind of nice. And then we move on to Fallout 4, where the double barrel would make an appearance once again. And the double barrel in Fallout 4 is one of the few guns that I don't really have a problem with the way that it looks, so that's kind of nice. This one would usually be carried around by raiders. You could find this very early on, and this usually came as a sawed-off double barrel, although not completely sawed off, more cut down, where the barrel and the stock were cut short. However, you could modify this into whatever size that you would like. So you could make this a full-size double barrel with a stock and a full-length barrel, or you could cut the barrel even shorter and then have this as a completely sawed-off, more of a pistol-like shotgun. Once again, this one did pretty much get outcompeted by the combat shotgun in really every way, besides maybe weight. Since the double barrel shotgun doesn't really have anything else on the combat shotgun. You only get 2 shots before you need to reload. There's nothing that you can do to fix that. And the reload isn't any faster in any way, so that doesn't really help outside of perks, but that would also help something like the combat shotgun. Combat shotgun also has a much bigger magazine, it has better mods overall than it, and there is unique versions of the combat shotgun that you can go and get without actually needing to find just random legendaries. Unfortunately, the double barrel shotgun in Fallout 4, you do have to just find a legendary version of it. Now, you can find some really good ones of that, and since it's a fairly common weapon, there's a good chance that enemies do drop it. So if you get something like an instigating double barrel or a bleed double barrel, it'll be just fine. It'll do tons of damage then, and it will be really, really good. However, if you get something very similar to that with like a combat shotgun, you're probably just going to go with that instead. So it kind of fits into this awkward spot in Fallout 4 where it doesn't really make sense to be building for, but it's not necessarily a bad thing either, especially if you just like the aesthetic of it. I mean, I've carried around the double barrel for like an entire playthrough of Fallout 4 because I just don't really care for the aesthetic of the combat shotgun in it. And this wasn't even a really strong double barrel. Like, one of my favorite ones to get was like Ghoul Slayer, mostly because it just kind of fits like an Evil Dead theme very well, so I really enjoy that. A very fitting weapon that's been pretty solid. In Fallout 1 it was good, in Fallout 2 it was good, in Fallout Tactics a little bit less useful, mostly just because the pump action existed. So you kind of just went for that one. In Fallout 3, probably at its strongest, at least with the full-size double barrel. Sawed Off was probably at its weakest. Weirdly enough, 3 probably has the strongest and the weakest version of the double barrel. New Vegas was very solid, and Fallout 4 was pretty decent, at least in the early game. So this has been the history of the Fallout double barrel shotgun. Now it's kind of changed. Tell me your thoughts. Which is your favorite? Which do you think is the strongest? I would really like to hear your opinions. Tell me those down in the comments below, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye-bye, everybody!